Well, hello, my radio friends. Now, I know I've been beating these drivers to death, but I had a group member ask if I could post a video on the design, construction, and operation with some close-ups. I guess with the aspirations of building one on his own. So, in this video, I'm going to touch on just that: the construction and uh, and then disassembly and kind of go over the components. So let's get started. Now, obviously, here is the driver. Now, I have removed the coil. The coil has been rewound. Have not put it on yet, but for purpose of this video, it works much better that way. Now, it is essentially, I'll say, four components. The magnet, this is a large magnet to the rear. This is an armature that goes across here. This is actually your vibrating reed. Here is a transformer, i.e. coil. And of course this is your pivot point. This is where everything affixes to. Your rod that goes to your apex of your cone and so forth affixes to here. So the way this one was assembled was it was actually soldered here and here, and I took a little small torch I had, melted the solder, removed the upper part of the transformer, and that allowed one to remove this armature. Now this is actually a unique piece. It's more going on in this piece than what meets the eye. But is it replaceable or replicable? I believe so. Allow me to explain. In this armature, it is actually six pieces, one could say. This piece here is affixes to the end, as one could see, but it's actually one, two, three, four separate pieces, front and back. There is a little break line right here. It separates those two pieces, top and bottom. And there's a solid piece that runs from rear all the way to here. So it's the centerpiece of steel is sandwiched between these four pieces. And that allows this to flex at that division point, front to back. Now, it's very hard to tell holding it in my hand, but when it's assembled, one can see that there is some flexibility there. It's fairly rigid. So, once again, one, two, three, four, a solid piece, a thin piece all through the middle of it here, and then the end support that goes to your drive rod. So, like I say, what looks like a pretty ambiguous piece is actually, there's a little more going on there than meets the eye. The rest of it is pretty simple. There's a magnet to the rear, and this is essentially a transformer, and I imagine one could replicate this pretty easily if one could find a transformer this size, merely disassemble it. The windings would not matter because you're going to rewind it to what we need. In this case, I wind it with either 38 or 40 gauge wire. Now, one will have to shorten the center part of the transformer. Of course, when it's fully assembled as a complete transformer prior to the modification, it's all these three pieces here are all going to be the same length. But once one was to disassemble it, they would have to shave this center piece down. And that is where the kind of the critical part gets into. Because one has to shave that center piece down enough to where when this armature is installed, that there's approximately a 32nd of an inch gap between this armature and this center post at this point. It's just a very narrow gap between those two, because that'll allow this arm to fluctuate up and down. Now, when in operation, this vibrates so small, it's one can't see it. You can't watch it vibrate. But if you were to put your hand on it, you could feel it. But it's very small, and mere thousandths of an inch. Now, of course, one will have to maintain the lines of flux of the magnet from, because it goes from the top of this armature to here. It has to all be ferrous metal, because it has to be magnetized through this magnet, and the base has to be ferrous metal as well. So you're going to maintain this lines of flux, or if you want to call it a circuit, if you may, through the coil, through the center of the coil, and around to this armature and back through this magnet. I hope that makes sense. So one couldn't make this out of wood or plastic, the base. So everything has to be ferrous metal. It has to be magnetic. And then the end piece here is just a piece of copper that has been, let me pull it off of here, that has been folded, and it's got a flex point here. Once again, I could think of several different ways one could replicate this without this exact design criteria, but it just has to have a flex point here, rigid mounted to here, to the base, but a flex point in the middle or at the end here to allow this. This is your reed that's going to go up and down along with this. Your reed's going to drive this fulcrum, and this in turn is going to drive your speaker cone. Well, that's it in a nutshell. I hope it makes sense. And of course, if you have any questions, by all means, feel free to ask. And of course, as always, until next time.